Welcome to Behavioral Grooves, the podcast that brings behavioral science to life. I'm Kurt Nelson.
And I'm Tim Houlihan. We talk to smart, interesting people in order to bring you insights on how behavioral science can improve your life. But before we get into that in this episode, we want to let you know about a special project that Kurt has been working on called Brain Shift.
Thanks, Tim. So Brain Shift is a new guided journal that my team and I have been working on for over a year. So if you want to really improve your life, this journal can help. We built this journal using behavioral science insights, many of which we learned from the guests on this very show. And those insights helped us create a daily process over 13 weeks that can help you achieve both your keystone goals and your weekly and daily goals as well.
Sounds wonderful.
We think it is. Lots of hard work, lots of research and development went into this. And I need to thank my team, Ben Grandlin and Alex Bellinger, who have done a tremendous job on this. It definitely wasn't me. It was my team.
They are a great team, and the work that you guys have done is just fantastic. And this is a very practical, very no-nonsense tool. It's kind of got like a magic productivity booster by spending a few minutes, right, in the journal. Your ability to focus on what matters most really makes your time more effective in achieving your daily goals. But Kurt, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Did this project ever scare you?
Okay, so it didn't scare me in a physical sense. I mean, it's a pretty small journal, and at worst, I might get a paper cut. But in the sense that this was a brand new arena for us, going out to consumers, that we had to figure out how to sell on Amazon and get this printed with quality. Oh my God, that was scary as hell when we got some of the proofs back from that. That was crazy. And the time that we took to build this and still had to do all the client work, hell yeah, that scared me.
Yeah, well, according to our guest today, that was a good thing. All those scares, they were good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Scott Simon is a happiness entrepreneur and founder of the global Scare Your Soul Courage movement. And his book is Scare Your Soul, 7 Powerful Principles to Harness Fear and Live Your Most Courageous Life. And his premise is that too often we spend our lives trying to avoid things that scare us. He argues that instead of going out of your way to avoid fear and all the feelings that come with it, we need to just face it head on, harness that fear.
And is that old saying, scare yourself at least once a day? That's kind of what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah.
And Scott talks about his life story and how taking on this mindset really changed his life, as well as many others. And he's kind of an expert in this.
That he is. And so with that, please sit back with a drink that will scare you to your soul and enjoy our conversation with Scott Simon. Scott Simon, welcome to Behavioral Grooves.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with you.
We are glad to have you here. And let's just get started with the first speed round question. Okay, most importantly, coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Ooh, you had a little thought there. I saw that there.
No. Well, I used to live in Israel, and every morning my roommate and I would make Earl Grey tea. And sitting in Jerusalem drinking an Earl Grey tea is an amazing memory. And so if there was any hesitation, it's that I do have a wonderful memory around it, but coffee all the way.
Okay. All right.
Excellent.
Would you prefer to go on a vacation with a fixed itinerary or no itinerary at all?
Again, super easy. No itinerary at all.
Kind of goes with the theme of what we're going to be talking about here today, right? Yeah, there we go.
That answer didn't blow my mind because that's totally consistent with who you are. Okay. All righty. Okay. So would you rather spend New Year's Eve in New York at the drop of the ball at Times Square or sitting in a room quietly meditating for 3.5 hours?
That is a very knowing question on your behalf. So I can easily say it would be sitting in deep meditation for 3.5 hours, reliving my entire life and getting a perspective on life that I could have never had otherwise.
Cool.
We might examine that in a little bit, but we have one last final speed round. We have one last final speed round question. Do you think we should scare ourselves a little bit every day?
I think it's essential to scare yourself every day. Cool. I even wrote a book about that. It is something that has changed my life, and I think it's magic in a bottle. I think it is something, if people really understand what that means and how actionable it is, then I think it's truly life-changing. I'm really passionate about it.
Well, let's talk about that. What do you mean by scaring yourself every day?
Sure. So I'll just take you back just a little bit. I was many years ago leaving to go overseas after spending a childhood very much in fear. I was bullied for most of my early childhood and was coupled with that very shy. So I led a life really where I wanted to be invisible. I really wanted to just run, hide, stay safe. And for years, spent my life in that box. I graduated from college and had the opportunity to fly overseas to teach elderly Holocaust survivors. This is where I drank my Earl tea every morning. And so I tentatively got on a flight from JFK to Tel Aviv and had a panic attack within a few minutes of the doors closing. I couldn't believe that a shy, unworthy child like me was going to be doing this. And I really had almost a moment of losing control. I had a small spiral notebook in my backpack, which I pulled out, and I wrote down, with no thought of where this was coming from or why it was coming to me, I wrote down, do one thing every day that scares you. That's what I wrote on that piece of paper. It almost tumbled off of my pen onto the page. And I thought about it. Where did this come from, and what is this saying to me? And the answer was, for the next year that I was abroad, to do one thing every day that pushed my comfort zone. To me, doing one thing every day that scares you was do one thing that everything in your being is telling you, don't do that. Don't say hello to that person. Don't say yes to this opportunity. Don't try to learn something new. All the things that I had spent my entire childhood running from, I was now going to be running toward. And to me, and now the organization that I started, Scare Your Soul, its main mantra is that very phrase, do one thing every day that scares you. So to me, it's all about tackling fears, pushing comfort zones, and do it consistently.
Okay, so we are talking about Scare Your Soul, 7 powerful principles to harness fear and lead your most courageous life. And I'm glad that you teed this up. You didn't just write a book, you're starting a movement. So this whole idea of, honestly, the book is filled with doing. You're a doer. You are, if I could just say it very plainly, you do shit. You just get shit done. And I think that's pretty amazing. But you wouldn't characterize your entire life that way. Was this moment on the plane, this panic attack, that transformational for you?
It was a huge tipping point for me. I think all of your listeners could probably think of a time in their lives where they were on one trajectory and just didn't know anything else. They just were in their, I use the phrase comfort zone all the time, but sometimes we lead life thinking that it just has to be this way, right? It just can't change. And the reality for me in that moment was this huge realization that I could lead my life differently. I didn't have to be that guy anymore. And so, yes, and certainly I've had experiences in my life afterwards that have informed my views on courage. I still consider myself a person who grapples with fear every single day. I'm not a guru that has transcended fear. In fact, I really, I take umbrage at even the suggestion that we should be fearless, that we can be fearless, that we should crush fear, that we should destroy fear. If you Google, be fearless or how do I crush fear, you'll see hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not hundreds of millions of websites that give you this concept. I don't want people to be fearless. I want people to have fear and to move forward anyway, because that's to me where the richest, most beautiful part of life is, when we're able to sit with fear and push through it. So yes, that epiphany kind of gave me it almost opened up, the sunlight hit the road. And I thought to myself, you know what, I can walk down this road. And I did. And for that year, every single day, I did something that scared me. I wrote about it in this little spiral notebook that got filled up completely. I still have spiral notebooks with things that I do consistently. And And to me, that just like people have practices that they're committed to, a journaling practice or a gratitude practice or a diet practice or an exercise practice, this is my practice.
Yeah.
And it opens me up to such beautiful things, but I feel fear every single day.
So Scott, you in the book, you actually tell a really nice story of applying this right after the plane ride. You land, you're in the airport and you talk about it. And I think it's really a good story because what it goes to saying is that scaring yourself isn't jumping out of a plane every day. It is these smaller kind of things. Can you tell the story of exactly what happened like immediately upon landing? Yeah.
Sure. So I had this epiphany on the plane, and so I landed, and if you can picture getting out of an airplane after an 11-hour flight, and you're rumpled, and you're shuffled into a very, very hot room. It was in Tel Aviv, and hearing strains of Arabic and Hebrew, things that I couldn't understand at the time. And I was waiting for my suitcase, and I felt someone kind of push into my backpack. And I turned around, and it was an older gentleman in a button-down shirt and khakis who had, trying to get towards the bags, had kind of bumped into my backpack. And before that flight, my initial reaction would have been to avoid any eye contact because it might lead to a conversation. And God knows what could have happened if I ended up in a conversation with somebody. Could be death. But I had that experience on the plane, and my immediate reaction was to say hello. We began talking, and he asked why I was in the country, and I told him, and I asked him what he was doing there. He was a resident of Tel Aviv. He was an architect, and we began to talk. And over the 5 or 6 minutes that we were together, we connected very simply, nothing crazy. And I was doing it. I could feel it in the moment. I was actually having this conversation with someone that I didn't know in a country that I had never, been to in my entire life. And he pointed to his bag. I was in front of him. He pointed to his bag. It had this, I remember sincerely, it had a pocket square, this beautiful pocket square wrapped around the handle. So I went and I got him his bag. And as I was turning around to give him his suitcase, he was writing something on the back of his airplane ticket. And it was his phone number and his address. And he said, "I want you to come visit me while you're in Tel Aviv." And I thought to myself that was the first friend that I had made in years.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's those little steps. And we've talked to many people on the show about we're often scared to talk to strangers on the plane or in a train as we're commuting to work. And yet those are the moments that actually we fear that they're going to be negative, but in the end, they create this life that is much richer and more joyful than we would ever anticipate.
And that really is the epitome of the work of Scare Your Soul, the magic of Scare Your Soul, why our ambassadors love it so much, why our participants love it so much, is that it isn't about flinging yourself out of an airplane. And I have done that. I have a fear of heights, and I did fling myself out of an airplane. But I will tell you this, I truly believe that it is more effective to get on a ladder, if you have a fear of heights, and get on a ladder and clean out your gutters of your house, if you have a house, for 4 days straight than it is to fling yourself out of an airplane. And I'll tell you why. It is, to me, the consistent action of pushing comfort zones that allows us to rewrite. I'm sure you've had guests that talk about neuroplasticity and our ability to rewrite associations, past associations, from negative ones into positive ones. And I did fling myself out at 14,000 feet, and it was a wild and wonderful experience. But I landed, and it was over, and I moved on with my life, and I still had this fear of heights. But getting on a ladder consistently teaches you, I can get up on a ladder consistently, and I can do this. So to me, it is this very simple, and we're all different, by the way. For me, having a conversation with someone I didn't know was pushing a boundary. For other people, it has to do with relationships or having tough conversations. With others, it's about pushing themselves out of their comfort zone in terms of their physical environment. Maybe it's starting a new physical practice or going on an adventure somewhere where they don't have an itinerary. For some people, it's work related, something in their career where they have ideas and they want to share them, but they're afraid that people are going to laugh at them or their boss isn't going to look at it in the right way. So we all have our own ways to push our comfort zone, but it is these little small actions that in the end of the day, I believe, push the needle.
You know, Nir Ayal has been a guest on our program, and he talks about that procrastination is not so much about avoiding, it's about our feelings. And I think that, like, you're getting to this, right? You're after that in a big way.
He is so clear and so brilliant in describing the fact that procrastination really isn't about the fear of the action or the implication. It's the fear of the discomfort that we have to experience as we're contemplating doing it. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because in the work that we do in Scare Your Soul, we view things oftentimes as Alex Korb and others talk about the downward spiral versus an upward spiral. Mm-hmm. That when we don't take action, when we procrastinate, when we avoid, when we kick things under the rug, we are contributing to a downward spiral. We are contributing towards a feeling of apathy, of stuckness, and then as you continue down the downward spiral, to anxiety and depression. Conversely, when we take action, and I'm not saying, by the way, all the time that it works out. People have had tough conversations that have led to outcomes that they weren't expecting, and some people have we have a kind of a famous challenge in Scare Your Soul, which is buy a cup of coffee for a stranger and have a conversation with them until the coffee is delivered. Super simple. I would say, if I had to guess, 95% of those have worked out insanely well. I have done it myself maybe dozens of times by now, and I don't think I've had one interaction that wasn't revelatory. But there have been instances where it didn't go well. So this is life, right? Like there wouldn't be fear around pushing comfort zones if we knew what the outcome was going to be.
Yeah,
right.
But what Nir talks about is, can we abide the emotion? Can we abide the feeling of, gosh, that feels uncomfortable, and if I just avoid it, maybe it'll go away? And the reality is, it never goes away. It never goes away. It never goes away, because you're going to be confronted with the same situation, probably with the same person, whether it's a boss or a significant other, or even with yourself. And you're going to feel it again. So my view is, let's do this thing. Mel Robbins talks about the 5-second rule of, can you get over 5 seconds of uncomfortability? We have a challenge once a year where we have a body positivity photo shoot. It's very private, and people are, meet with a photographer, and the photographer, takes photos of them, and it supports our body positivity challenge. It is incredibly hard to get in front of a photographer, and I've done it many times now, and to take your shirt off, and you're there, and it's a cold room, and you're thinking to yourself, I just want to flee from this. But I have to tell you, after, whether it's 5 seconds or 15 seconds or 30 seconds, it becomes this joyous experience, because you're living life fully. You're all of a sudden, the things that have stopped you before are not stopping you again. And there's such beauty in that moment. And I'm an addict for the feeling that you get when you push a comfort zone and you feel free and joyful and powerful afterwards. And then, by the way, that thing that you overcame, it's now in the past.
Yeah.
You've done it. Yeah. And you can do it again.
I love that.
I want to go back to the component that you talked about, all right, overcoming that fear of heights isn't about getting into a plane, because I can do that once and I've done it great, but I still have that fear of heights. It's getting on that ladder every day. And you talked about this before we got on the air, that this practice is ritualistic, that you can create this element of it over time. So if you were to talk to our listeners and say, what is the one thing that is important for them to kind of embrace this kind of process? What do they need to do in order to really make this happen?
Sure. So as simple as this sounds, I think it starts with intention.
Okay.
It starts with intention. I oftentimes, if people ask me, how do I make this a part of my life? I say, every morning when you're brushing your teeth, I want you to have on your mirror a Post-it note that says, do one thing today that scares you. I will tell you, one of our ambassadors one of our first ambassadors tattooed Scare Your Soul on the side of her chest to remind herself every morning that she was going to push. So I think it begins with intention, because for anybody that knows, for example, I'll create a corollary for you that I think is really powerful. I'm sure many of your listeners have had a gratitude practice in their life, whether it exists now or they've done it in the past. Someone has given them a gratitude journal or they've bought one. Gratitude is so powerful, not just because you experience gratitude at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day when you write in your journal. It is the fact, for those of us who, I have a gratitude practice with somebody where we share five gratitudes by text every night. We've done it for 7 years. It is the fact that you spend your day looking for the things you're going to say in that text. So the text is important, but what's so much more important is how are you spending your day looking for those things? So my view is when you're brushing your teeth in the morning, say to yourself, do one thing today that scares me. Okay. And if we can commit to that, then you're spending your day, you're on the subway and there's an interaction that requires you to connect with somebody. You're at work and you have an idea and you're wondering whether you should raise it in a meeting. There's someone who you find enthralling, but yet intimidating, and you don't know whether you should send them an email and ask them out for a cup of coffee. If you have this intention in your mind, the chance that you might actually say yes is so much greater. So really all it takes is a Post-it note.
Oh, okay. So in those, I want to go back to the buying coffee. 95% of the time you buy coffee for a stranger is fantastic. What about the 5% of the time? Like, we are hardwired to avoid failure. We don't like failing. We don't like the image of it. We don't like the feeling of it. What happens when you run into that 5% of the time? It's like, oh man, this dude is just not getting it today.
So to me, and granted, it takes a while to come around to this. Failure is a badge of honor, in my view. There's a chapter in the book called "Screwing Up is Sexy," and that was my way of saying, if you don't fail, then you're not out there. You're not playing on the field, because not everything is going to go. And we can talk, if you'd like, about the difference between perceived outcomes versus actually achieving. In my mind, the success is the action. It isn't the outcome of the action. Whether you want to look at it, in a Buddhist kind of way, where this is about leading a life where we strive to remove attachment. So when we do something, we're raised that A equals B. I'm going to do A because I want B as the result. My view is A is the entire game. Taking the action is what it's about. And my view is that 9 times out of 10, the outcome will be something that will open you up to connection, to love, to a new idea, a new friendship. Just go back to my story about Yitzhak in the airport. It was meeting eye to eye, seeing somebody for who they are, opening yourself up to a vulnerable conversation that led to a friendship. And if I had chosen not to have that interaction, I would have been fine. I would have gone on with my day, but I never would have met a friend.
Yeah.
I never would have been exposed to the ideas that he has and the impact that he had on my life. And so to me, it is the full embracing that failure will occur, that it is bound to occur, that it should occur. All the work that I've done in positive psychology teaches us that as human beings, we have this fallacy that we think we know that we can. It's almost like no one I think has ever used this term as I know it, but it's almost like a crystal ball mentality, that if we do X, Y, and Z over the next period of time, the end result will be Y. And the truth is there are so many variables and so many unexpected curveballs that life throws us that we actually don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing. I really do. I think it's a good thing, because how many parts of our lives do we look at and say, I didn't plan that, but I'm so damn happy that that's what my life looks like now. I met this person. I'm doing this is my career. We didn't plan those things. They happened, but they won't happen unless we push into areas where we're uncomfortable.
Yeah. Scott, so what you're saying sounds a lot like we've talked with Annie Duke multiple times on the show. And Annie is a decision maker, a decision scientist. She studies decisions. And part of that is she goes, we often rate how good a decision is by its outcome. And she said, that's not how you rate if you made a good decision or not, because as you talked about, there's, A plus B plus C doesn't always equal Y, because there's a whole bunch of other letters that get in the way. And some of that's luck, some of it's environment, some of it's all this other factors that come into play. But did you set up that decision with the right intention? And I love this idea that it's A is really the end game. It's about making that choice. It's about doing the action. And I'm wondering, when we think about that, where do you think that we tend to fail when again, as you talked about this idea that we always think that there's it, we know that's not the case, but why do we keep thinking that? Why do we keep thinking that we can, have 100% surety of the outcome?
We could have an entire podcast on the answer to that question.
Let's go.
Okay, let's do it. Part 2.
Right.
First of all, we are so conditioned to not look at life that way. And so we're battling the ways that we've been raised. We're battling the way that society tells us we should be successful. And so you're inherently pushing a rock up the hill based on how we're raised to look at decisions and the impact of those decisions. But there's something I think deeper and more interesting than that. And that is when we do something and the outcome is not what we're expecting, there's this initial thought that we have, unless it's a practice, that it's not working.
Yeah.
Right? So we've experienced discomfort. We did something, and then all it gave us was more discomfort, right? Like the outcome gave us more discomfort. So that to me actually is such a critical moment, because that's, if you think about it like a triathlete, someone who wants to run their first marathon, okay? And they start to begin a running practice, and it's hard. Yeah. And some days they go out, maybe one day they run 5 miles, and then their next run, they can't hit 4. They're just exhausted. Their knee hurts. And that's a really critical point right there, because are they going to then, go out the next day? It was a hard day. It wasn't the outcome they wanted. The key in my mind is what can keep you motivated to continue the practice, even though we felt more discomfort than we thought we were, and it didn't turn out the way that we thought that it was. That, and I hate to keep on going back to Scare Your Soul, but I think, again, this is why the work in Scare Your Soul is so powerful, is that when you have a partner, whether that person is an accountability partner or it is a community that supports you in your effort. I mean, imagine those people who are solo runners versus having a running partner. It's somebody who can say to you, I got your back. I'm with you step for step. I'm not going to let you fail. We're going to cross the finish line together. There's something that is so, and there's so many psychologists and positive psychologists that talk about the benefit of having accountability systems around you, that I think it is very hard to continue on when quote unquote we fail or there isn't the outcome we want. The point is, just like a running practice, the key is to strap on those shoes, lace up, and get back out, because that's what's going to create the shift in the end. So I think many people think that they need to do this work alone, that there aren't people around them that can help them. I've created one of our latest kind of innovations in Scare Your Soul is I've run WhatsApp groups for groups of 12, where each day, each person sends a WhatsApp message about one thing they did courageously that day. And it starts off like, I did this and I did that, and it was great. It was terrific. And after 5 or 6 days, you start to see people shift and say, I did this and it didn't work out, but I'm really proud of myself.
Yeah.
That's what happens in this practice. And I'm evangelical about it, because it just like people who are evangelical about running and what happens when you become a marathon runner and you do it and it changes your life for the better and you have so much more meaning and friendships and things like that. To me, a courage practice is exactly the same.
I'd like to go back to the meditation thing that we brought up the New York, being under the ball in New York City, New Year's Eve versus the meditation. What do you think people don't really understand about the value of meditation? What potential misconceptions are out there about meditation?
I think it's so funny. Meditation, if you think about it, is one of the easiest practices you can imagine. You're sitting. You are literally sitting. Okay? Like, that's what you're doing.
I'm sorry, but I don't think I've ever had it explained to me quite that way, but you pretty much summed it up right there.
Yeah. And what's so fascinating about meditation, and I've led meditations for years, and I have incredible meditation teachers, people who have guided me in a meditation practice. And it is actually one of the things I think that slips off the table the soonest. As if you rank it versus people who decide to start a yoga practice or a CrossFit practice or a running practice, and then you say to them, I want you also to start a meditation practice, it's the meditation that falls off first, right? Which is so fascinating to me. And I think part of it is, it's a long-term proposition, not a short-term proposition, right? Like, yes, you'll feel relaxed, potentially, and you'll feel good. But are you seeing dramatic gains that you can quantify? And the answer in many cases is no. So we're attuned to building muscle. We're attuned to shedding fat. We're attuned to seeing a tangible result. There is no scale that you step on with a meditation practice. It's you. It's only you. And your mind is shifting back and forth. And some days are better and some days are, as we all know, for those of us who have meditation practices, you can have a day that's the best meditation practice. And the next day, your mind will not stop jumping back and forth. So I think that that's a really, it's a real challenge for people to get over, the sense of, is this actually working? And is this worth all of this effort that I'm putting in? Again, I think it is all about consistency, that just like brushing your teeth, if you're the first, 20 minutes of your day is a meditation practice and you do it consistently, then it'll start to feel really odd that you jumped out of bed and hopped in the shower or checked your email or got on with your day. And I really think that a meditation practice is a beautiful foundation for a courage practice. And I'll tell you why. Meditation, for those of us who practice types of meditation where breath is involved, there are so many wonderful opportunities in the moments where we're about to do something that takes courage, that if we can slow down and breathe, we can get through the action. I'm sure you've had guests that talk about the fear response. When our amygdala is activated, something is tweaking us and we feel fear in the moment, whether it's because of a past trauma or something is indeed, we actually feel fear in the moment because of a stimulus. That to be able to slow down in that moment, maybe focus on your breath and say, is this something that is actually unsafe for me? Or is this something that is triggering a story, a past trauma, a habit that I avoid certain things? I have a lot of coaching clients that do this in relationships where they're very courageous in their work life, and then they come home and they will never have the tough conversation with their significant other that they need to have. It's like they can't translate that level. So in that moment, if you have a meditation practice or a breath practice, to be able to slow down, I have a practice in the book called Ladder. It's a bunch of different steps where really so much of it is about slowing down and understanding in the moment, if you can understand it in the moment, and then being able to either take action or not take action. I never would want anyone to think that fear is something always to not pay attention to or to counter. Fear is there to keep us safe. It is critical. And you can read all the literature about, there's great literature around a woman. They call her SM in the literature. This is someone who's through, I believe it was a disease, her amygdala became deactivated. And so she has no level of fear in her life. And I wouldn't want to lead the life that she leads. She literally she doesn't know one interaction from the next, whether something is unsafe. And she even can't read the fear in other people's eyes, which is fascinating. Not only can she not see fear, but she cannot perceive it in others. She can perceive happiness and she can perceive anger, but she can't perceive fear like the rest of us do. So I wouldn't want to lead that life. And when I have to have a tough conversation, or I need to buy a cup of coffee for a stranger, or I need to do any of the things that I suggest that other people do in the book, has dozens and dozens of prompts and suggestions. Slowing down and focusing on your breath, to me, is a critical piece to determining whether one should push forward or not.
Yeah. Scott, are you familiar with Philip Zimbardo's The Heroic Imagination Project, or by chance? Do you know anything about that? Just real quick. So Philip Zimbardo did the Stanford prison study back in the early 70s. Subsequent research and different pieces as he was looking at the evil, the banality of evil, and how that kind of came up. And he said, well, let's look at the corollary in this idea of heroes. And he said, we often think of heroes, we put them on this pedestal. And he said, no, really, it's everyday heroes that we have. And it reminds me a lot of what you're talking about with this courage practice, because he's saying we can, if we just get people to be thinking about, the simple steps of speaking up in an uncomfortable situation when they see something is wrong, of, taking that step to help somebody across the street, being those everyday heroes of this. And it really touched on this component where I see there's a lot of elements in this. From that courage piece, do you see people becoming more heroic? in kind of the everyday kind of heroism, as opposed to, jumping into a fire to save a baby, but no, it's like they see something wrong at work, and where they might have been scared before, now it's like, all right, I can say something.
There is 100% a shift in self-perception when you take on a courage practice, just like there is 100% improvement when you take on a gratitude practice and you do it consistently and you do it meaningfully, that you will feel more grateful in your life and you will reap the benefits of that gratitude. So the answer is absolutely yes. And I hear it all the time from our ambassadors, or I get emails from people, and it is stunning to me that the vast majority of those emails that I receive are saying, I did this little thing and I feel so proud of it. And so that's why I really want to reiterate that our work is not about those huge shifts of quitting your job and moving to Bali. If that's what you need to do, then that's what you need to do.
Right.
But to me, the real magic is when we can work that muscle, that courage muscle, every single day. So when the time hits for you to stand up for that person in that work setting, we've all seen it. Somebody who is speaking up on behalf of themselves or a cause, and they get beaten down by somebody else. A boss maybe dresses them down in front of everybody. I've seen this in my own work life. You have a choice to make. Mm-hmm. Are you going to stand in the breach and speak truth to power, or are you going to shrink back? And that's not about leaping out of an airplane. That is about what are you going to do in that moment. And if you have had a courage practice where you consistently, every single day, you're doing something that is pushing your comfort zones, the chances that you're going to stand up in that moment are so far greater. And I tell many stories in the book about things that have happened to me and happened to others, where they would have never been prepared before. But because their self-perception has changed and now they view themselves as a courageous person, then all of a sudden it makes total sense for them to stand up for somebody else in that moment. And it's not easy. It's never easy, but it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I love the idea that you're talking about. That's the self-identity that somebody now takes on, right? You talk about this, like you talk about your childhood as being a part, and you had a different identity as a child as what you have kind of developed further on. And I think that is so powerful when we think about what that means for how our life goes on and live. I just find that fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It is fascinating. It's also interesting. I'm going to segue over to music. I'm just going to tell you right now. I'm not going to. Yeah.
And that is not a surprise at all, Tim. And it's part of your self-identity. There we go.
It is part of my self-identity. But Scott, you were pretty clear about in writing and getting prepared for the book that you had a Spotify playlist going. Were you actually listening to music while you wrote? Was that part of your process?
It was for the prep. So I needed to write in silence. When you're a first time author, you learn, everything is a new lesson. Every day is a new lesson. And I opened the book by being very explicit that a publisher, an editor for a wonderful publishing company, sent me an email asking me if I'd like to write a book. And I deleted the email because I thought it was spam. I'm not one of those wonderful, terrific people who have spent years creating proposals and hiring agents. And for me, the whole process worked in reverse. So I kind of had to reverse engineer how to write, because I had this wonderful opportunity to put the work of Scare Your Soul on the written page. I did find out that for me, music prepared me for writing. I did have a playlist that got me kind of in the zone, and then I needed sincere quiet, which was not always easy to find. I did a lot of writing from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. And, and I had a wonderful, dear friends allowed me to spend some time in Sun Valley, Idaho, where I was able to spend a lot of time walking and thinking. And that became a lot of the foundation for the book is those daily walks in the mountains, just literally being in nature. That was just a wonderful moment. Music has always been a part of my life. I talk about it very clearly in the book that in almost every part of my life, my grandmother was an entertainer, a piano player. She, in every place that she ever lived, including the assisted living location where she spent her last years, she would get down at the piano once a week, invite everybody from the assisted living facility down, and she would play piano for the entire community. That's in my blood, and so music has always played a very important role for me. It prepared me, and then I would go into silence and write, and then jam out afterwards.
and you loved music since a kid, and you've been playing out in public all that time, right? And you didn't have any fear about doing. Actually, you tell a wonderful story in the book. You want to repeat that story just real quickly?
Sure. So, and I hope that your listeners will identify this in some way, that they acted a certain way in life and enjoyed something in a certain way in life, and then all of a sudden it shifted and they needed to get it back. So I loved, as I just mentioned, singing and being part of a family that loved music. My grandmother would play. My entire family would sing along. It was like the Von Trapp family singers. It was ridiculously cute. And that's how I spent my childhood. And then in fourth grade, our choir had a substitute choir teacher who came in, and he really wanted us to blow everybody away during our choir concert for our families. And he was teaching us 76 trombones was the keystone of what would be the triumph of our choir concert.
From the Music Man. From the
Music Man. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And he got very upset at me because I have terrible pitch. I could not hit the notes that he wanted me to hit. And every time he tried it, I would be adding in my clunker, and he got visibly upset. And he kind of got bright red, and he stormed towards me. And he said to me that I was ruining the practice ruining the experience for everybody else, and that I should just mouth the words and not sing. And he said it in front of the entire grade. And I look back on it now, and it seems kind of funny and humorous, but in the moment, it was the most embarrassing, just awful thing that could have happened to a young person in front of their entire grade. And I didn't sing again for 35 years. I would be at concerts, and my friends would be, yelling along with the music and singing at their full, and I would be mouthing the words in my 30s. We're not talking about, in my teens. And it was just almost like this monkey on my back. So as I was beginning Scare Your Soul, I had already created the group, and there were ambassadors that were starting with us. I decided to meet the demon. I decided to really tackle this. And my way of doing that was to grab a guitar and to go to a very busy restaurant on a Sunday morning. It's a restaurant famous for their brunches. It's called the Inn on Coventry, and there's always a line in front. Always as they're meeting out their tofu scrambles and their Belgian waffles. And I pulled out my acoustic guitar and I sang in front of that line of diners. And it started out very poorly. It did not start out well. And as you can imagine, a guy pulling out a guitar, but he thinks this is going to be great. Let's go. And then all of a sudden, he sounds terrible and off pitch. But the key thing was, well, really two things. Number one was about halfway through, everyone came over to my side. Like, I think they were rooting for a guy that clearly should not be doing this and yet was doing this. And so there was this whole sense of like it was a huge human experiment, and it was going really well. And they, kids were running up and putting dollars in my guitar case. I mean, it was super cute, but it was really the feeling that I had afterwards that was the revelation. And it wasn't that we talked before about outcome, right? It wasn't that I sounded great, or it wasn't that somebody said, "Hey, you got to play in my band," or "Come back next Sunday." It was none of those things. Nobody did that. Nobody invited me to do this again. In fact, they probably didn't want me to do it again. But it was how I felt afterwards. I felt, I almost like levitated back to my car.
Yeah.
I felt untouchable. I felt powerful. I felt grateful. I felt open and vulnerable and free. And it was I came back and I wrote a Facebook post about that experience. And I was expecting some people to say, "Oh, that's cool. I'll do that. I'm so glad you did it. Maybe I'll do something." And the post went viral, and it was shared around the world. And people said to me that next week, I did something, and it wasn't about singing in front of a restaurant. It was all kinds of other things. and somebody in Iran did it, and somebody in Kazakhstan or in Poland, and that really gave me the confidence to really grow Scare Your Soul. Because once I knew that all it took was me saying, here's a permission slip. I'm just giving you a permission slip. That's it. I'm not doing it for you. I'm not helping you, but I'm saying, do this with me. And, for those of us who are involved in, social movements, sometimes that's all you need is someone to say, I'm doing this thing and I'm seeing huge benefits. Would you want to join me? And then you get some momentum. And then now all of a sudden there's a book and all of this wonderful momentum around this work. And it's all free. It's all encouraging people to be better. And I really do believe that, and this came out in my positive psychology studies, that when we get happier in our lives, when we have a positive surge in our lives, it doesn't just affect us. It affects our families, and then those families affect coworkers, and those coworkers affect communities, and those communities affect governments. And so there's a real world-changing view of this, that yes, this is about the individual, and that's super powerful. But when we get better and happier and more courageous, it affects everyone around us, and it can really change the world.
Scott Simon, you are an inspiration, and this has been so much fun to have you as a guest. We hope you'll come back, but thank you for being a guest today on Behavioral Grooves.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.
Welcome to our grooving session where Tim and I groove on what we learned from our discussion with Scott, have a free-flowing conversation, and talk about whatever else comes into our soul-scared brains.
Yeah.
Soul-scared brains. Thing. Is that it's scared soul brain? No, scare our soul-scared brains, right? That would have been right?
Scared soul.
Scared soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's basically, it's about time we just woke up and gave ourselves the opportunity to just push ourselves just a tiny little bit every day, just a tiny little bit.
I know,
but that's not a big thing.
So you and I both know a gentleman, Paul Schoening, right? And he used this mantra for years. And I always kind of thought, I don't know about this, right? That's a little weird. But then I started to see what it was doing for him. And I'm going, oh, I get it. It's not about actually being physically scared, right? But it's about doing something that pushes you beyond what you're comfortable with. And that, I saw the change that it did for Paul. And I feel like this is what Scott is talking about, that when you do this consistently, that it can change your life.
Well, and can we just go there for just a minute? Because you and Paul did this with hundreds, maybe thousands of people over many, many years. You did a whole bunch of things that kind of put people in scary situations, right?
I don't know about that. I mean, we did
trust falls and stuff like this.
Okay,
right?
Yeah. So we did team building events that might have had a little bit of a scary component on it. Getting people up on high ropes courses, up on telephone poles, and crossing over wires. But they're harnessed in. They're perfectly safe. I mean, you're more likely to hurt yourself getting in your bathtub than you are being on one of those ropes courses. But okay. Yeah, I mean, it is super interesting when you think about it from that perspective, and probably lots of really good insights into this as well. I mean, the trust fall, which is one of my favorite events that we did. Basically, you get people to get up on an 8-foot scaffolding that you have there, and then they fall backwards into the outstretched arms, upraised arms of their team. And you don't really realize, like when you're looking at it from the ground, you're going, that's not too high. But man, once you get up there, it feels like you're on top of Mount Everest. And and you're like, those people are like ants down there, and you expect me to fall backwards into them and they're going to catch me. And for many people, I'm large, I'm a big guy, there's no way, they can't even hold me up. And what's really interesting, though, is that for most of the people that go up there, they go up there and they do it relatively easily. They obviously, there's a little trepidation in there. But for others, it's their legs are shaking. They are, they start to hyperventilate. There's this whole like almost tears in some people. And, and all that we ask them to do, and this is really interesting, is we say, just just push until, you feel like you can't, and then just do a little bit more. Just try to go that extra little effort. Even for some people, even climbing up the ladder to get up on the scaffolding, that was scary. So we would just ask them, well, just take a step up. Or if they got up 2 steps, just take that next step. And what was really interesting is sometimes by taking just that next step, they would take the 4th step and the 5th step, and then they'd be up on top. And oh my God, that would be amazing. And so that was really cool when we think about that. And the other interesting, sorry, I'm monopolizing our talk here, but the other really interesting piece on this is that we always offered saying, hey, I don't want to do this. And I choose, part of the whole event was before you get on the ladder, you say, I, Kurt, choose to do this, right? And you can get to the ladder and say, I, Kurt, choose not to do this. And what was really interesting is you had some people do that, and you could tell that was super scary for them because...
To say that they were not going to do it.
Yeah, because everybody else is doing it. So you get the social pressure, you get this peer pressure to just do it. And I think some people actually probably did it because they were super scared to do it, but they were more scared of bucking the group. And what that would mean, they're going to think that I'm scared or that I'm weak or whatever it is. And so I know some of those people that got up there and did it because not because they weren't super scared out of their mind, doing a trust fall back into the hands of their team, but they were more scared of choosing not to do that.
Yeah. Well, I love that the part about just walk up to the ladder for someone who is saying, I can't do it. Just walk up to the ladder and just hold the ladder. Just do 1 step on the ladder and then stop. Just hold there. And then if you can go farther, take another step. And I've seen this. I've seen you do this with people.
Well, you've done it. You've helped me on these. Yeah,
I have, and I just love seeing how there is that psychological aspect of this incrementalism that if when you think about these things as tiny steps, it's not such a big deal. When we think about it as oh my gosh, I have to climb this really high thing, and I have to do all this, and I have to stand up there, and I'm going to get scared, and then I have to fall back. And when I think about it in its entirety, it can be overwhelming. But if I just think about it as, okay, the next thing I need to do is just take 1 step. Okay, I think I can do that. So I think that you've built this stuff psychologically really soundly, and no one's ever gotten hurt in the thousands of people that you've had through it.
I've had one, but that's
wow.
We don't talk about him anymore. So
and that was me. So
no, but I think this aligns back with what Scott was saying with the idea of, all right, overcoming a fear of heights, you can go and jump out of an airplane, right? That's a one-time thing. That's a huge thing, right? I mean, that'd be scary for 99% of the population. But the real way to overcome that fear is to climb that ladder every day, is to go up and clean the leaves out of the gutter, to go and change that light bulb, to go and do whatever that is, but to do it consistently in small increments. And that piece is the piece that I think I took out of this that was really interesting, which is why it's this idea of do something that scares you every day is so important, because it's not just you're not going to change who you are through a one-time activity. You might, right? There's life-changing events, but the vast majority of us aren't going to have that, epiphany, and we're not going to be a totally different person after doing something. But if we continually do something, then our mindset goes, well, I can't be afraid of heights because I climb up these ladders all the freaking time, because I'm cleaning the gutters, I'm changing the light bulb, I'm doing, I'm painting the second story, whatever it would be. So
this also reminds me of something that Scott was talking about, the crystal ball mindset, this idea that we think we know how it's going to be. We know we're going to be scared. We know it's going to be terrible. It's going to be awful. And then we get up and then we do these incremental adjustments, and it's not as bad as we think. And I feel like this would be a great exercise to maybe try to help us get over the damn attribution and endowment biases that we have, like just we think that we know everything that's going to happen. And because I know me, you can't tell me that I don't know me. I know me. I know that's just not going to work for me. But guess what? When we just do these little incremental changes, things can go pretty well. And I think that there's something really rich and rewarding on a psychological basis to sort of bring us to a new mindset, to bring us to a new place.
Well, it's Dan Gilbert who talks about we are not good predictors of our future happiness, right?
That's right.
This idea that we, know what's best for us, and sometimes we don't, and we need to explore. We need to try new things. We need to continually challenge ourselves, challenge our beliefs that we hold, and move on to say, yeah, I was right. Okay, that's pretty good. I mean, look, let's use Annie Duke here. Let's do all right, I'm 80% sure that I'm going to be pretty scared going up that ladder, right?
Right.
All right. Then you go up there and you go, oh, all right, maybe I was in the 20%. It wasn't so scary. So then you readjust that percentage next time and you readjust it. But we need to continually do that. Otherwise, we just live in these false beliefs of what we believed, from our past. And that may not be the truth anymore.
Exactly.
All right. So I think that's probably a good place to wrap up. What do you say, Tim?
I'm scared that we might be ending too early.
Stop that. This is the perfect time to end. You were pausing there a long time. That's a perfect sign to end. There we go.
Okay. But we do want to encourage people to go out and buy the book or maybe join up with one of the Scare Your Soul groups that are formed all around the country. They're easy to get to. Yeah. We'll have the links on the show notes.
Yeah. And we want to remind people that you should scare yourself by going out and sharing this episode or any episode of Behavioral Grooves with some friends or family. We know that you might be scared to do it, but you'll find it'll be great.
You might even scare yourself by writing a review for us on Apple or leaving us a 5-star review, rating. That would be a scary thing.
That is scary. That's a scary thing. But go out there, push yourself. Make sure you're out there trying to do something, you might not have done before. You might find really enjoy writing reviews. Who knows? You might be become a constant reviewer of podcasts. There you go. And remember, BrainShift is available for sale right now. You could go out and buy that and help set up a Scare Your Soul kind of goal. And BrainShift will be able to help you achieve that. So there you go.
And listeners, we hope that you do scare yourself into having a great week and that this week you go out and find your groove.